Israel Adesanya, the former UFC middleweight champion, who finally broke his silence in regard to his 293 title loss to Sean Strickland in an interview on his YouTube channel. We were going to kind of talk about that in depth, but Sunday night, another layer to Adesanya's story comes out when the New Zealand Herald reports that he had just pled guilty to a drink driving charge stemming from being pulled over on August 19th, which was just 18 days before his UFC 293 fight with Strickland. Adesanya was driving with 87 milligrams of alcohol per 100 milliliters of blood. Per his team, the legal limit in New Zealand is 50 milligrams. Adesanya released a statement shortly after this news came out saying, "I want to apologize to the community, my family, and my team for the decision I made to get behind the wheel after drinking at a dinner. I am disappointed with my decision to drive. It was wrong. I know that people might follow me, and I don't want them to think this behavior is acceptable." The maximum penalty for a drunk driving charge in New Zealand is 3 months of jail time or a $2,680 fine, according to the New Zealand Herald. So, Nolan, let's go to you first. I know there's a lot of layers to this now with this involved. We were kind of just going to try to put the loss to Strickland in context, given Adesanya's comments in the interview, but this adds a whole other layer. Was he in the right mindset? What kind of led to these decisions? All these different things. Does this make you look at the loss differently to Strickland, this whole drunk driving incident, on top of what he said in the interview on his YouTube channel?
Man, it's maybe. I'm not one to judge people. It's kind of hard for us to know unless there's a pattern of behavior that things have gone wrong for somebody. I do appreciate the comments that he had. I mean, he himself said this was wrong behavior. It's not something you ever want to hear about a professional athlete, especially in, we don't have seasons in MMA, but this was a, mid-season going into the playoffs sort of decision by him. So the timing's obviously not great there. I think at this day and age of Ubers, or, I'm not sure if they have Ubers in New Zealand or something similar, cabs and stuff, guy with that much money, you'd think would be able to make sure that those sort of decisions, he doesn't have to make those sort of decisions. So I guess it's just disappointing all around. It's something to consider, I think, when you think about the loss. Like, if he was making bad decisions like that so close to a fight, were there other decisions that were made that were bad as well, that were not to that, not in a legal level, but, were things not going properly for him as a whole at that point in time, whether it was training, whether it was focus, whether it was whatever. So I think it's certainly not something that you want to see by any means. I think his statement yesterday, he did handle it pretty professionally well there. And again, it's about pattern of behavior. I'm willing to, people make mistakes, people, for whatever reason. Izzy, to my knowledge, I don't think has any legal history besides the weird brass knuckles incident from the MSG card last year that at least we know of. So hopefully, he learns from this and it's not a pattern of behavior, and we can kind of, when his story's all written, we don't have the rap sheet that we've had with some of the other fighters that have started to kind of have one thing happen and the next and the next and the next. And before you know it, they have a whole laundry list of kind of issues that they've had legally throughout their career. So fingers crossed. I've always appreciated how Izzy carries himself, even sometimes when he doesn't necessarily lean into the interviews or lean into the media, like we saw the last time around where he didn't speak, which I thought was maybe a little bit strange as well. Like, even when he's been combative with the media, he's been willing to sit there and kind of have that conversation. I haven't agreed with every thought, but he's presented them. So I'm not really sure what was going on with him. Maybe we'll hear more from him going forward, but ultimately something that you don't want to hear a UFC champion did 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before their fight.
Yeah, it's interesting and this is me kind of giving more my opinion than like reporting anything, but this happens a few weeks out. Like, if you compare it to maybe like the legal limits in the US and some of these states, like it's just a hair over. It's not like he was like massively double 2-3 times the limit, all that stuff. It seems like he just went through like a checkpoint. As far as I know, he's driving around in this very nice like Ferrari, Lamborghini, whatever you've seen on like his social media. This is complete speculation, but I know even dating back to COVID and how those fighters at City Kickboxing were kind of treated by the government in New Zealand. I don't know if there's maybe a little extra target on some of these guys' backs, especially someone like Izzy. I have no idea. That's just speculation on my behalf. But Danny, I mean, just to hear like a story like this come out 18 days before the fight, is it a red flag for you? Even just the fact that he's like out socializing, drinking in a situation like this, whether it's, 2 beers or something more significant, is that like a red flag for you of where maybe Adesanya's mind was at going into the fight with Strickland?
Again, I kind of have to side with Nolan here. It's hard to tell because maybe he was kind of doing this all along, just drinking a little bit and fighting and defending belts and winning belts. We don't know, right? Like we, for example, know John Jones' track record that he's been able to sort of achieve great heights while also, doing extracurricular activities, right? So it's hard to tell, but certainly I think on an ideal scenario, you wouldn't recommend anyone be out drinking and late at night, especially when you got training and stuff like that, 2-3 weeks out from a title fight. So it's certain, and given that this was one of his worst performances, if not his worst championship performance in the UFC. So it is a bit concerning. You wonder where his mind is at or was at when he fought Sean Strickland. He also had that movie premiere, I believe on Fight Week or the week before. So you kind of start adding all these things, and then you wonder if maybe just the fame got a little bit, to his head, and also like how seriously was he taking Strickland? Did he think that, as long as I'm in shape and I go in there, with a relatively decent camp, I'm gonna breeze through this guy, since on paper he wasn't the most threatening guy. So it is certainly a bit concerning on that aspect where his mind was at then. But I don't think it's indicative of a path that he's heading. At least I don't hope. As Nolan said, he doesn't really have any previous record of misbehaving or getting in trouble with the law. He's fairly been a clean champion on that end. So we'll see how he bounces back, and if he gets into any more of these type of issues. I hope not, obviously, for his sake and the sake of others. You should never drink and drive, especially if you got that kind of money and you have more options, right? But yeah, certainly it does make you question where his mind was at for that Strickland fight.
Matt, anything to add kind of before we get into the interview side of it and things that he said, just given this situation, how it ties in? If he had won the fight and the story came out, I think people would maybe be celebrating him or being like, look how badass he is. Like when John Jones kind of, said he was doing cocaine a couple days before beating Daniel Cormier, that type of stuff. But your just thoughts on this, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Cormier and John Jones thing, when he did that dig at the press conference. But it's one of those things where you look back on it now and things kind of make more sense. But at the same time, you don't really want to pass too much judgment on Izzy because like the guys have said already, like we don't know if he's always done this. Like if it was just like a dinner with the team, like was described in the report, and, they were just having a couple of drinks at dinner. Like we don't know if that's something that they always do. That is a fairly common thing. If you go out anywhere at any given restaurant and any given night, people are going to be consuming alcohol to various degrees. It didn't seem like this was anything like overly egregious. It was over the legal limit, and he definitely should not have been behind the wheel. I don't want to minimize that whatsoever. If you're drinking and driving, like you're absolutely in the wrong, and I'm glad that he admitted to that. But listen, it's hard to pass judgment on Izzy for this thing right now because we don't know. There's a lot of things that we don't know. His mentality obviously is something that we do have to question right now because I'm sure we're about to get into it with the video thing. He did mention that one of his coaches said that he noticed a shift in his mentality when the opponent change came about from Dricus to Sean Strickland. So I don't know if that is what played into this thing where he's like, I can probably have a couple of drinks because it's Sean Strickland now. I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much about it. But at the end of the day, it's not a good look for Izzy. I'm glad he owned up to it. Hopefully, like Danny said, it's not the beginning of a troubling pattern for him.
Yeah, and Danny, I know you were the one who wrote up that Izzy interview that he dropped on his YouTube channel for MMA Junkies. So after watching that back and writing up the stories and stuff, what was kind of your biggest takeaway? He finally spoke on the fight. Maybe you could tell the interview is kind of heavily edited, and that's the right he has with his own YouTube channel. He can control the narrative a bit. But when you looked at that, did you take away like good signs, bad signs? What did you think of the interview?
This is so difficult. Just by the way, I wish I would have mentioned this to you guys at least on our Slack, but I knew this was going to happen. I knew that he was going to go out there, or maybe not, don't give an interview to the media and just say, wait till something drops on my YouTube channel. Obviously, why would any athlete at this point do that kind of thing, right? Like, you can just do it on your own YouTube channel and boost your subscribers and views and whatnot and followers and be able to monetize that. So it's an unfortunate thing that's happening, because I do believe that there were certain questions that needed to be asked that obviously were not, because it's under his YouTube channel, and the person that's interviewing him probably even previewed him before as far as like what questions were going to be made and whatnot. So once something's that edited and that controlled, it's hard to take away things from it, because you don't really know under what light or what angle were they trying to do things. I don't want to call it exactly PR, because he did give us some information, right? But it's certainly much more controlled. I would have liked sort of an independent person be doing the questioning on that end. But he didn't seem too concerned with the loss. He seemed pretty comfortable. He didn't really we see some fighters lose their belt and we just see a fire in them. Like, I need to get this back, right? Like Valentina Shevchenko leading up to that Alexa Grasso rematch, where she said, there's no resting until I get that belt. I have no choice but to show no mercy, right? Like, you see a certain degree of urgency, of fire. I didn't really see that with Israel Adesanya. Maybe he's just ultra confident that he's just bound to gain the belt back, that maybe that version that he showed at UFC 293, he knows it was subpar, and he knows if he takes things seriously, maybe he will take the belt away from Sean Strickland. And given that he's the most popular name in the division, you best bet that he's going to get pretty good opportunities to get that belt back. So it's hard to tell exactly, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to form an opinion when a message like that is highly edited and thought through before it's released to the public, right? So it's hard to tell and engage exactly where Israel Adesanya's mindset's at.
For sure. And Nolan, what was your read on this interview? I mean, he didn't specifically state the next move. I guess the closest thing you could kind of take away as far as like a rematch, he said him and his team are quietly confident. He used that quote multiple times, but he didn't say, Sean, you're next. You're waiting for me. We'll fight when I'm ready, blah, blah, blah. He made no definitive statements as far as his future. So I guess what was your read on the interview and just the little nuggets he did drop in there as far as the future?
Yeah, I think when I kind of said the thing earlier about, I felt like things have been different this time around with his loss. Like, I guess really that's what it boils down to, is I feel like I can't really get a read, right? Like Dana White couldn't even get a read on fight night. So it's been a bit strange, a bit confusing. I think he's, like Danny kind of alluded to, Israel's kind of emotionless to a certain degree about the whole thing. Like, he's taking a very objective approach, which I appreciate. But I also wonder too, like, being able to do that so quickly after a fight makes me wonder if maybe there are some aspects of this that are being overlooked, or he's not really I don't know. It's been a weird road for Israel Adesanya in terms of what we've seen since the loss, between the press conference, between the video he's put out, especially where Dana White seemed to lean into the rematch a bit. You would think Izzy would kind of ride that wave a little bit more, unless he's got something in his back pocket, if he's thinking about moving up or something again. I don't know, man. It's been strange. It's been hard for me to kind of read, but the thing that does give me confidence is we have seen Israel Adesanya lose his title, have people doubt him, and come back and make a big statement. So I kind of, if history, I like to think history does repeat itself in MMA at times, especially when it comes to some sort of mental hurdles like that other fighters really struggle with. To already see that somebody has overcome those things makes me confident in their abilities. So I do believe he'll be back. I think that I appreciate that he's not too emotional in a weird way, but it also does concern me that it makes me think that maybe he is emotional and he's not showing it.
Right. And let's close this out with you, Matt. Blades in the chat here says Dricus should be fighting for the title next. Given Izzy's comments, given this incident, this legal issue, what do they do next at middleweight? Should Sean Strickland hold out for a rematch, knowing that that's probably the highest selling pay-per-view now that he's the champion, now that he gets points? Or do you move on, keep busy, as we know Sean Strickland likes to do, and fight Dricus du Plessis, especially knowing he's right there with like Jared Cannonier being booked against Roman Dolidze, things like that?
Yeah, I think either way they go, it's a win-win for the division for Izzy. And I think that was part of the reason he was so non-committal, is because he knew that he had this legal issue coming down the pipeline and didn't know what the blowback was going to look like from the promotion and publicly. But if they do the Strickland rematch, it works out perfectly well. If they do run Strickland and Dricus, Izzy has history with both men, no matter who wins. So I think Izzy's in a win-win spot. I think his next fight will be for the title. It just depends on who's it going to be against. And if the UFC does want to keep Strickland active, if Strickland does want to go out there and fight Dricus, run it. Because like I said, Izzy's going to be there waiting for whoever wins that fight. And I think that's going to be the next fight if they don't do the Strickland rematch right away. But either way, I think it's in a good spot. The division's in a good spot right now, at least for the top, in terms of interesting title fights over the next 2 or 3. So I'm with it either way. You know, the promotion and Strickland and Izzy and Dricus want to go. However you want to shake it up, I'm cool with it. It all makes sense to me.